at the end of the day, AI is going to live everywhere. I think right now it is, let's say we know the big name, NVIDIA. I've seen those designs where it's, the couple rows of racks with, you have the overhead busway, you've got the water coming into a, large rack, talking 100 plus kilowatts of rack. I think they're, I think a couple it's like 20 megawatts for a couple rows of that stuff. But, that's going to flip on its head. Again, if we can start going more of the inference model, the inference isn't as power intensive. It's just a lot of little transactions. Think of like a database, you're just putting little transactions in it all the time. It's going to still be cabling intensive because, again, latency. We're talking about latency, so we're talking about networking, we're talking about cabling. So what I imagine the future home being, it's going to still require some power. Not the 100 plus kilowatts in a rack or 600 or whatever it's going to be. If you want to, sure, you can do that. Maybe you can stack it up and have it, do a whole lot of it at once. But I still see it as like a 33 inch rack, 40, let's stop talking about 42 because no one does 42 anymore. We're talking about 48, 52, 60, and even beyond that at some point. Of course, I really personally don't want to have to get up on a ladder to rack servers. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. But it's going to have to be a nice, wide cabinet. It's going to have to be deep. We need something that, I can cable. And if we're going to be bringing in, dozens, if not hundreds of cables into this, I need to be able to have cable management. It's got to be able to be organized. If we're bringing in water, I'm going to have it deep so I can bring in the water manifold, do all the water cabling, all the power cabling. It's going to be something that's large but is flexible. That can be adjusted by, I as the customer. I don't want to have something that's, it's locked in. Like, no, because I'm only thinking of maybe the next 5 years, but what's going to happen in the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? I want to have a capital asset that I could keep redeploying over the years. So definitely something that helps me keep the thermal profile contained. So whether that be water, some sort of locked-in air cooling, like that. It's something with, something I can bring in some massive PDUs into. Obviously, power intensive, and maybe not as power intensive as that big old AI, NVIDIA stack, but it's still going to be there. And I know AI's form factor is going to look, right now we're very familiar with the H100, 200, 300 GPUs, all that, but there are other players who are building things that are like, when you servers for it, but there's also other players building things that almost look like a refrigerator that you put into a rack that would do all the things of that NVIDIA stack. So watching the trends very carefully and who's coming into the market and doing what, because it's definitely an interesting time.